All right, it looks like all of our students have joined us. So whenever you're ready, Nick.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are joining us here on our virtual Mount St. Vincent University Social Enterprise for a Day event. We want to welcome all of our students, and we also want to extend a very warm welcome to our panelists that are accomplished, and we're going to hear from them in just a short while. We want to welcome once more everybody on behalf of the Department of Tourism. Welcome to our event. Tonight will be an interactive 2-hour event that focuses on social and responsible community leadership. The next 2 hours are going to go by very quickly. I have the very distinct honor of introducing what Social Enterprise for a Day is, how it's worked in the past, and give you a framework, if you will, of social enterprise and responsible management. Then we'll turn our attention over to our panelists, and we are in for a treat. We have panelists that have international, local, national exposure, and we wanted to hear from them. After our panel discussion, and after we thank our panelists for joining us, we'll then turn to a live case study that has been prepared by a colleague of mine, Nick Sharpe, from Big Brothers Big Sisters in Colchester County in Nova Scotia. He will provide a scenario that will guide our breakouts that will happen shortly thereafter. Students will be broken into groups of about 10 people and will spend anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes analyzing the live case and coming up with real solutions to problems. We will then come back and have a 15-minute debrief talking about what you have suggested and recommended in your groups, and then we will close with some final remarks. Without further ado, I have the distinct honor and privilege to talk to you about social entrepreneurship and enterprise for a day. This is our 10th year. We are not on campus to celebrate our 10th year of Social Enterprise for a Day. We're joining together virtually. Social Enterprise for a Day began 10 years ago with a bright idea that while you're at university here at Mount St. Vincent University, that you can be exposed not only to all of the wonderful things that you talk about in your class. In your core programs, you will talk about becoming responsible, educated, global citizens. In your classes, you have talked about perhaps marketing and issues in entrepreneurship and the wonderful world of management or human resource management, finance, accounting, economics. But the idea around Social Enterprise for a Day is to expose you to the idea that in addition to business, that there are other things that you can accomplish while also pursuing profit for yourself. Over the last 10 years, I'm happy to report to you this event that took place on campus and now is taking place online has raised over $15,000 to help support Halifax, so local business initiatives. We have been able to, in the past, support a wide array and diverse charities, nonprofits, and social enterprise. We have been able to support things such as the ADSM House for Women and Children, the Ronald McDonald House. We have been able to support the IWK, Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Last year, we were privileged to connect with Hope for Wildlife, and of course, a local phenomenon, if you will, in the business community, Hope Blooms. But students, panelists, those who are joining us, we have a problem. Houston, or in this case, Halifax, we have a problem. Let's talk about that. The pandemic has exposed an opportunity. Much prior to the pandemic, social enterprise was gaining steam. In the world of business, the many trillions of dollars of wealth that is created every year in the global economy, we have been met with trying times, with rising inequalities, with struggles to break out and to create success. We have seen business approach the limit, if you will, as to seeking profit. See, here is what our world looks like in a consumerist mindset. Our oceans, they are polluted, filled with plastics. Our shorelines, remember prior to our pandemic when we used to travel the world in vacations, here is a snapshot of a beach in Mexico filled with consumer products that litter not only beautiful beaches, but also have ecological and marine life impact all over the world. Here you see the effects of capitalism, of rising production. Take in this image. This is something that we've all become familiar with over the last year. This is the coronavirus. This is a pandemic that has wreaked havoc all over the world economy. And of course, just this past summer with the killing of George Floyd, we have seen a renewed call to include Black voices, to include those who have been traditionally and historically marginalized, creating a space for equality, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility in our business environment. So this may seem like it is a bleak picture, and indeed it can be. However, tonight we are going to learn that that doesn't have to be the case, that the footprint of business doesn't necessarily have to be a very dark image, that we can actually, through business, through pursuing profits, we can actually do good, do social good. Here is very briefly the business ecosystem. We have three sectors on a high level. We have the nonprofit sector, we have social enterprise in the middle, and we have business. These three macro sectors all interact together to create value. The nonprofit sector, a sector that is responsible for 8.5% of all of Canada's GDP last year, is oriented in a way to rally around generating very little, if any, profit or any revenue, but to extend and to represent real issues in our communities and to connect stakeholders to particular resources, programs. Think of inner city youth reading programs. Think of the wonderful work of the Canadian Cancer Society. Think of your local food banks, faith-based nonprofit organizations. On the other side, you have business that attempts to maximize profit, to be your own boss. Business to create wealth and to create jobs and to create a middle class for your family to enjoy a lifestyle. But then you have, in the last 20 or so years, then you have a new emergent space, and it's called social enterprise. And what social enterprise is, it's pursuing profits, pursuing the interest of business, but with social goals. So it's in it to win it in terms of business, but also at a cost of putting people in front and looking at issues and seeing if business can solve some of our very doom and gloom, very dark issues that could depress us, but actually inspire us. So what is this? What is social enterprise? Social enterprise is a business form that is operated to address social, cultural, environmental, or economic challenges. With the social enterprise, most profits are reinvested to support that particular purpose. And that is according to the Social Enterprise Network of Nova Scotia. Here's how I define it. Social enterprise is putting heart into business, On the right-hand side, you see a brain, business innovation, looking for profitability, looking to be successful. And on the left-hand side, you see heart, social issues, environmental issues, cultural issues of our day. Social enterprise is the intersection of these two things coming together. Social entrepreneurs, those who are engaged in social enterprise and responsible community leadership, they are all of these things. They are motivated by social gain. They have high innovation and creativity, high levels of social conscience, and of course, they are found to take higher levels of risk in business. And then, of course, on the other side here on the left, you have entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, they are motivated by financial gain, high levels of self-interest, perhaps lower levels of social conscience, and higher level of drive and determination. That, my friends, is what research has borne out to be true. A couple of numbers for you. 2,769,500. That number represents the total number of self-employed individuals here in Canada last year, according to Statistics Canada. 2.7 million out of a labor workforce of about 18 million Canadians. 2.7 million were self-identified, self-employed individuals, or as we would like to refer to them as, entrepreneurs. 30%. This number should give you a excitement. See, 30% represents the proportion of the Canadian workforce that will be self-employed in some form, some fashion, whether it is in a small enterprise with a budget of 500,000 in 10 years, to freelancing, moonlighting, contract, gig work. 30% of the working population in Canada will have some self-employment in just 9 years from now. And that number is growing, and that number can be you. Number one, you have one life to live, one life that you can imagine impact on society, one generation that you can pass a responsible business practice and community leadership onto the next generation, one life to make a difference in our world, one life to create impact, to leave the world and our business community better than the form and the shape that we have found it. We're going to transition now. I wanted to have a conversation with 5 outstanding, well-accomplished, international, national, local celebrities. They are celebrities in the business community. In a moment, we're going to turn over this discussion to a panel discussion, and it's going to feature 5 social entrepreneurs and or community leaders. We have with us Lori Barker, who is the CEO of the Ronald McDonald House Charities of Atlantic. We have Mary Gordon, who is the founder and president of Roots of Empathy. We have Connie McInnis, who is the CEO and president of our studios here in Halifax. We have Kate Pepler, who is a owner and CEO of the Tare shop in Halifax. And last but not least, a good friend of mine and colleague, Nick Sharpe, who is the executive director of Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Colchester County in Nova Scotia. Join me in welcoming our panelists. Panelists, it is so good for you to join us, and we look forward to our conversation. I want to start off, and this is for all panelists, and let's start. Connie, I'm going to turn this to you, and then we'll pass it along. But can you tell us? I've introduced you very briefly to our audience, but can you describe your organization that you lead, the position that you enjoy, and give us a little bit of a story of your involvement in your organization?
Try to remember all that. So yeah, my name is Connie. I own our studios, which is a brand of boutique fitness studios here in Halifax, HRM. We currently have 3, just about to open a 4th location, and our thing is we revolutionize the way that people move. So we offer a variety of group fitness classes, and so my role is a little bit of everything. I started mainly doing this because I loved movement and I loved teaching, but I do have a background in business and public relations, and so I'm very much intertwined in every aspect of the business. There's not a piece of the business that I don't love. Sometimes I show up and I'm doing the janitorial duties, and sometimes I'm on a teacher face, and I do a lot of quality control. I create our programming, I do our marketing, I create our strategies. So I'm very much involved intentionally in every part of the business just because I love it. I think you had one more question, but I can't remember what it was.
No, that's okay. The story of your involvement. How did you become involved in your organization? Now, in this case, you actually started from scratch. Talk to us about that story.
Well, how long do I have? Obviously fitness is a big part of it. I was involved in fitness from the age of 2. By the age of 5, I was a competitive gymnast and started training to be at a national level. So it was very demanding. It took up a lot of my life. And so it's always been a huge part of my life, but I never had intention of working with it. I went to university for psychology. I did public relations after school. And basically I really went into the world in a piece, not really knowing what I wanted to do, but another piece of me just being a very passionate person. And I just said yes to every opportunity that came my way. I knew I was passionate about marketing and public relations, and I moved to Toronto shortly after university, and just got involved in an array of things. Worked for not-for-profits, worked for fashion magazine, worked for basically every avenue and every person and every individual, and worked for individuals who would run events. And I just got involved in so many things. And it really just allowed me to kind of pick away at what was of interest to me and what I wanted to pursue and where I saw myself. And, I think ultimately, there wasn't really a place within either, any fitness realm or in any business that I felt was really the whole package for me. So I very much knew that in order for me to really feel like I fit and blended into what I wanted to do, I was going to have to create it. And as such, was going to have to disrupt the industry a little bit to kind of find my place. So it was definitely a combination of working in all fields, fine-tuning, what made sense for me and what I was passionate about and what worked for me, and then just creating a space that I wanted to work in, but mostly a space that I wanted to create that I didn't feel like existed for the population.
We're going to follow up with you, Connie, in a little bit, because you have such an inspirational story, and one that I think, like all of our panelists, will reveal some of the struggles and the tensions of being your own boss and marrying together that idea of being socially conscious in your business. So welcome. Thank you so much, Connie. We are happy to have you. We're going to turn it over now to Lori. Lori, could you talk to us a little bit about the organization that you represent, the position that you hold, and the story of your involvement?
Sure. So thank you for the invitation to join you this evening and for the past support that your team there at the Mount has provided our organization over the years. We always love the visit when you come down with your contribution and get to connect your students with the cause. So I am the CEO with Ronald McDonald House Charities Atlantic, and our mission really is about keeping families together when they have a sick child who needs to travel to access the medical care they need. So, unfortunately, not every family has equal access to to the healthcare that they require just by virtue of distance. So, you know, we have the house that's there to provide support to families that are traveling from rural Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and New Brunswick. And then we also have 2 family rooms, one at the Moncton Hospital and one in the IWK, where families can just get a break from the hospital setting. They can enjoy a meal, have a shower, do laundry, participate in science experiments, and, you know, just stay together in a bit of a more normal environment than the hospital room itself. So I joined the organization about 5 years ago, actually, as the Director of Development. I've been in the charitable sector for 20 years. It's, you know, when I landed here, it wasn't something I planned. I have a business degree, but an opportunity presented itself. And once I connected with the charitable sector, there was no turning back. It was just a perfect alignment for me. And then it was about kind of finding the organization that really reflected those values that were most closely aligned with me personally. As a mom with 3 kids under 10, and as someone who has advocated for access to healthcare in prior roles, this was just, you know, it felt like the stars aligned. And I joined the organization, and then we had a transition in leadership in the summer, and I assumed the role of CEO. It's an incredibly exciting time for us right now because we are getting ready to build a brand new Ronald McDonald House for the maritime families that visit with us. So it's a $24 million undertaking. We just actually announced the public phase of the campaign last week. So a really transformational time to be with the organization. You know, you go back to your roots, and my first job was actually at McDonald. So it's really neat to see how things come full circle. And believe it or not, the owner of that McDonald's from Greenwood in the Annapolis Valley is actually on the board. And was on the board when I was hired into the organization. So I will say, advice to you now, you never know when things will come full circle. So always bring your best self forward. I've had the privilege of volunteering with a lot of great organizations along the way too, and shout out to Big Brothers Big Sisters. I was on the board for 10 years and actually had an amazing experience with a number of littles over the years too. So great to be here tonight, and I look forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you, Lori, and congratulations on your new role as CEO. And we look forward to continuing our longstanding relationship. So thank you so much. We're going to turn it over to Mary Gordon. We are thrilled to have Mary Gordon from Roots of Empathy. Mary, can you introduce yourself and talk to us a little bit about your organization that you founded and the story of that organization?
Thanks, Nicholas. Great to be with you, and very inspiring to hear Connie and Lori speak about their work. And I'm already feeling guilty after Connie telling us about her fitness. I'm working out of my basement, and my big exercise for the day is going upstairs. So I'm really charmed to be with you all. And the Roots of Empathy organization is 25 years old this year. So I'm the founder, president, and CEO, and working hard to work my way out of a job. So I started this in Toronto, and I'm from Newfoundland, but I had moved to Toronto and started this. And it was an idea that I wanted to break intergenerational cycles of violence, because I had been working with domestic violence and child abuse and neglect. And what had occurred to me was that in all that suffering, the common thread was the absence of empathy. There were no monsters, but there were a lot of people who just didn't have any empathy. And then I set up my first innovation, which was parenting and family literacy centers, and that became public policy after many years. But I learned I learned basically at the foot of families. So what I learned from that was that all those parents who came to these centers, and they were mainly newcomer parents or parents who were struggling with issues of, you know, not enough food, insufficient everything in life, poor housing, etc., was that the way the parents loved the baby, we call it the attachment relationship, in that first year of life basically set the baby up or not. So if there was an empathic relationship between the baby and one parent, and it only takes one parent, it's a home run if you got two. If you got grandparents or a community, you know, a home run again. So putting together those two things, that with violence and bullying, it's the absence of empathy. But where do you get it? You get it through love in the family. So I decided to bring that love in the family to classrooms. And that's what Roots of Empathy is. You put out a green blanket, you get the baby and the parent, 2 to 4 months age. They come all year. Now, not to make it sound overly simple, I was an educator, once a teacher, always a teacher. But the idea is that children are coached to observe the babies, to read the baby's emotional language. What is this 2-month-old baby trying to tell us? They can't walk, they can't talk. They're basically beached whales. So you coach the children to observe and tell you what they think. So you're building their emotional literacy. And then that's affective empathy. And then the cognitive empathy is the idea of what's the baby's purpose? The baby's trying to reach that toy. How can we figure it out? So you put those two, cognitive and affective empathy together. And what we found was that the children really did internalize through our coaching. There's a big curriculum for all of this. It's not just happenstance. So we found out that the children really did internalize the baby's feelings. So they knew what it felt like to be confused or to be frightened or to be lonely. And then through all sorts of guided discussions, they really learned to understand one another. And that's where you had massive growth of empathy. And of course, empathy goes up, aggression and bullying go down. We had massive research done. Guess why? The babies are altogether too cute. So you could be dismissed, right? Because it looks so sweet. But basically, this program has revolutionized policy in many countries, and we're now on 4 continents. But always, we won't grow faster than we can measure impact. So that's probably enough for me for now.
Well, Mary, it is such a privilege and honor to welcome you as well as to all of our panelists. And we look forward to talking a little bit more in a few minutes about how you brought your idea to the international community. So we look forward to that. I'm going to turn it now to Kate Pepler. Kate, talk to us about your organization. You're also a local social entrepreneur, and talk a little bit about the story of how your organization got off the ground.
Yeah, so I'm Kate Pepler. My pronouns are she, her, and I came to Halifax in 2011 to go to Dalhousie, where I did a double major in sustainability, environmental science, and marine biology. And after graduating, I was really overwhelmed and depressed about the state of the world. I'd spent 5 years studying all of the ways we're destroying the planet, and it was a lot of information to take in. So I started a website that's aim was to share environmental success stories to inspire action. And through that, I fell into the zero waste movement and was reading about package-free shops popping up all over the world. And I tried to lower my waste and live a zero waste or low waste lifestyle. And it was really hard to do at the time. There was nowhere that supported that goal in the city, in the province. So that's where the idea for the Tare shop came from. And we opened our doors in October of 2018. And we actually just opened our second location in downtown Dartmouth in January. So the Tare shop is a package-free bulk store, coffee shop, and community space. So we aim to educate and inspire folks to live with lower waste in their lifestyle and help guide them along that journey.
Excellent. Well, Kate, thank you so much for joining us. And again, I look forward to learning a little bit more about this zero waste business concept. I think it's so very much needed right now. So welcome. Thank you. Last but not least, Nick Sharpe comes to us from the Colchester County in Nova Scotia, and he is the executive director of Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Nick, could you describe your organization, the position that you hold, and give us a little bit of a story around those two questions?
Certainly. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, Big Brothers Big Sisters is all about relationships. Primarily, we match children and youth in our communities, and we serve all of Colchester and East Hants. We match the children and youth facing adversities and added stresses in their homes with vetted, screened, and trained volunteers and community. And we foster that relationship. And over time, what we find is that that relationship helps that child develop more assets that help them later on in life, and will equip them and give them better chances at succeeding in life. So in a nutshell, we're all about supporting the healthy development of children and youth through mentoring and through these developmental relationships. Lori, it's always nice to talk to an alumni and fellow supporter. Thank you. And over the last couple of years, Big Brother, our organization, so there is 6 agencies throughout Nova Scotia, and there's almost 100 agencies throughout Canada. And of course, it's an international organization and brand. But in our community, we just went through a major transformation too in the last couple of years, where we outgrew our space. So we actually bought an existing building, which came with a business. It's a longstanding dairy bar that's been in our community for over 4 decades. That sees tens of thousands of visitors each year. And we actually rebrand it and we operate it as a social enterprise that hires some youth from our program and gives them some meaningful and transferable employment skills in that young age. And we also have plans. We're in the process now of building a playground on our green space and with this newly renovated building. So that's pretty much it.
Excellent. Well, welcome, Nick, to the panel. And we're going to hear a little bit more from Nick as we conclude our panel and move on to our second segment of the night. So stay tuned for that, everybody who is joining us. Now, the next set of questions, they're directed at one for each of our panelists. And we're going to begin with Lori Barker. Lori, social enterprise and responsible management are often mistaken for the idea of existing in a charitable nonprofit sector. You have enjoyed a successful career that began in McDonald's and that ended up in an NPO. In your opinion, straddling both sectors with executive experience, what makes social enterprise different than charitable causes, and how might they be similar?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with the how are they similar, because that's a really short one, although I will keep my remarks brief. You know, the alignment, and part of why I think there's sometimes a bit of misconception, is that we are working towards the same outcome. You know, we are all about, from social enterprise to the not-for-profit charitable organizations, we want to advance the great work and address the needs that are existing within our communities, locally, nationally, and internationally. And so those shared missions and commitment to make the world a better place is what we share in our biggest priorities and at the core of why it is we do what we do. As far as how we're different, it really is about how we secure the funds to do what it is we do. That in a nutshell is really what is different. A social enterprise organization has a business model that generates the revenue that makes the work, the great work they do in the community possible. So it's very much driven through the business model. The charitable organization has a very different revenue model where we turn to the external community, we turn to donors and government sometimes, and granting organizations like foundations to provide funds in a philanthropic way. So instead of a business transaction that, you know, has wonderful, great community sensitivity around it, it's more about a philanthropic contribution, purely altruistic, where the person contributing is doing so without any expectation of anything in return. So the neat thing when it comes to, you know, securing funds to make difference in the world, you want to have a lot of different ways that people can get involved and help to make those magical things happen. Even within an organization that's fundraising, you want to have a lot of different ways people can contribute and donate, whether it's special events, whether it's, you know, fundraising through peer-based things, major gift contributions. The great thing is social enterprises come along and provided a whole other way to help to facilitate even more funds that make even more impact in the community possible. So, you know, same thing, same outcomes we're working towards, very different ways in which we're able to get there. But the great news is because it's adding a whole other layer, it brings a whole other source of revenue that can make even more impact possible. So the greater good just continues to grow as we see more social enterprise happening. So it's a wonderful thing, but that is really the distinct difference between the two approaches.
Excellent. Thank you, Lori. I really enjoyed how you highlighted that they both add value. It's just to what ultimate goal, what end goal, what aim. So thank you for that. That's wonderful. Mary, I'm gonna turn it over to you. You've mentioned that 25 years ago you founded your organization, Roots of Empathy, and it has been an organization that has grown to every Canadian province and beyond, 4 continents, 11 countries. Can you talk to us, what are some of the challenges and opportunities perhaps that are involved in bringing your ideas into an international community?
Sure. Well, my goal was that I wouldn't leave home until we were every province of Canada who wanted us. And it turns out they all did. So when we did leave home, the first country that invited me wholeheartedly was New Zealand. And the reason was they felt that our way of working with families would break their cycles of violence, which were the result of colonization. That the Maori people had been disempowered and were victims of addictions and all of the usual things that we understand in Canada that happened to our First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. So the main language, there are 2 main languages actually in New Zealand, and the Maori language is completely foreign to the Canadian ear, and the Maori culture is not so foreign if you understand Indigenous cultures in Canada. So there's always a linguistic challenge, but that's not such a big deal. You can get people to translate your curriculum without too much trouble. The culture is a problem. You have to be able to be very humble, to be very quiet, and to go and observe and understand culture, to be led. The other thing is, what are the policies at play? Education systems are different everywhere. Our program is delivered during instructional time at school. So what does the school system value? How will you fit in? In terms of other policies, a very major policy that affects us is what is the parental leave policy? And it's only in recent years in Canada that people who had a baby were entitled that one or both parents could claim some time in order to support that crucial relationship, that attachment relationship on which we build empathy. So, for example, in the United States, piece of cake to go their language and culture. Policy, uphill. Because in the United States, it's completely corporate values. So that there is basically no parental leave. The people where we go to, the needs are highest. So we're looking for the neighborhoods that are low income. So who are the parents who are going to volunteer in the program with their baby, which is how we build the program. They're either unemployed or on hourly paid jobs. They cannot afford not to work. So you have to do, and as Lori was explaining the 2 models, our model is a combination of contributions from the community, individuals, foundations, corporations, and government. And in Canada, right across the country, at some point, governments have helped us. So that's not the case in the United States, end of story. It is the case in New Zealand. So then you go to Korea. Well, in Korea, actually, we're in 15 countries, Nicholas. Not that it makes any difference. It doesn't make you any better at doing it because every country is different. I just noticed you had said 11. But in Korea, the whole story was to completely throw it up in complete confusion because the culture is so very different. Number one, even modern women stay home for the first 3 months of their baby's birth. And we need babies between 2 and 4 months. So we had a window of 1 month of finding the baby. So it just complicates things. So we spend a whole year trying to understand the lay of the land in a new country. You have to get someone who's going to support you to go in and listen and learn. Now, not me personally, but so it's a very, I call it, we do a listening tour. Every place we go, we do a listening tour. So Hawaii in the United States is a completely different kettle of fish than New York City. Same program, same curriculum, community development, completely different, because we work with individual families. We find volunteer instructors from the community. And I have to say, they're very much from or agencies that work on the land, and people who believe in charities and not-for-profits. Very often we co-train, like Nick in your shop, we would be very likely, Nick Sharpe, we would be very likely to co-train some of your people. That's the way it kind of works. And it's a win-win. So I think it requires a lot of being open and understanding how you can have an impact, and where there are some places where it's foreign to volunteer. You know, that the government in Norway, the government gives everything. There's a very high income tax, but the government gives everything. People are very kind and generous, but there's not that history. So the public health nurses deliver the program in Norway and they volunteer. So every place is different, but every place loves their children and wants the best for their children. So there's, we have a process, but that process unfolds differently everywhere.
Wow, thank you, Mary. That was remarkable. And the number of countries that you were involved in, now up 15, demonstrates the impact that you have made, not just in our country, but around the world. So thank you for that, for the work that you do, and for being culturally sensitive. Connie, I wanted to switch the conversation here. You have such an inspiring story. From a very young age, you've had a deep passion for people, business, fitness, and you have been able to successfully bring these things together in such a way to give you purpose. And so my question to you is kind of twofold. One, how does someone go about fusing together their interests with business? And because you've done that so brilliantly, what is your advice to someone who wants to do what you have done by bringing together interest with business to forge their own business, but they're afraid perhaps of taking that first step into the unknown?
All right, I think I always get the longest, longest questions. So first off, to bring interest in business together. So, you know, I think at the root of it all, my thing has always been having a really deep why, and probably the most, I think a lot of entrepreneurs will tell you, one of the most pivotal books you read is Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And, you know, especially when you're trying to create something new, you have to have a really deep-rooted reason of why you're doing it. And it wasn't actually even until about a year ago that I was able to uncover truly my why. I kind of had an understanding of, okay, I really care about this and I really care about this. You know, fitness for me has always been an escape or a safe haven from a very young age. And then turning into a business was really you know, I've spent a lot of time outside of Halifax. I've spent a lot of time traveling around the world and exploring different cultures and seeing different experiences. And you know, even the feeling you get when you walk into one cafe versus another, and that always really resonated with me. I always just really studied and bought into why we would feel the way that we would feel when we'd go somewhere, and how can we continue to grow and evolve that. And that came back to the fitness industry for me, because the fitness industry has historically always been so you know, so focused on more of a negative connotation. So a lot of the times you're tying fitness into something to do with body shaming or weight loss or transformation or trying to get a certain figure, or it's a certain season. And that never resonated with me. And I wanted to make that change myself. And so in order to do it, I had to create a space that I was going to be welcoming and opening and try to not fit into the boxes of what this traditional industry had kind of set the tone for. So that was a big piece of that. And so, yeah, just having that really strong why you're going into it, and just always coming back to that, and every decision that I make now and moving forward and in the business, it always has to come back to why I'm doing it and being in it for the right reasons. My business has evolved based on what more I've learned and how I've grown and the shifts in my personality. So it always comes back to that deep root of why I'm doing it and who I am. And I think that's definitely at the forefront. People who know me come into my business and they very much can see a reflection of myself. And it is, and I think it has to be, because you have to be so connected to why you're doing it and making sure that it's really purposeful. The second question along the lines of stepping into the unknown was the question. Yeah. I guess my biggest advice there is to start small. So, I'm heading into my 6th phase of growth in 6 years. But I started with no money. I didn't have somebody helping me out. I took a small loan out of Seed, a young entrepreneur organization. And I started with one room, 15 spaces, open concept, not much to it. Everything on the walls was do-it-yourself decor. All of my marketing was guerrilla marketing. I was the only kind of person I had maybe one other person working with me. So I did every layer of the business. But starting small and while I encourage to take risks, it has allowed me to grow at the rate that I have grown, because I've kept it small. I've kept it contained enough that I can still have a reflection on every aspect of the business, and it's kept it whole, and it's kept it connected to why it started in the first place. And I think that the reason we have made it to where we are is because we've been able to hold on to that.
Excellent. Thank you, Connie. And so inspirational, coming back to that question of why we do the things that we do and why we pursue things. So thank you for reminding us of that. That's incredible. I want to talk to Kate. Kate, you have such an innovative business idea, and you've brought it now to market here locally. So the package-free coffee shop and bulk store, first of its kind in our city. You've told us a little bit of the story, but how have you had to, because I can imagine that you've had to overcome some attitudes and preferences. So talk to us about that. How are you overcoming preferences, taste, attitudes? We're addicted to consumer goods and to the packaging that has a negative impact on our environment. So how are you able to overcome those attitudes that often value convenience rather than being responsible and being a sustainable consumer?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of this, again, is what Connie was saying, the why. Really being clear with the customer why it's important that we're reducing our plastic waste, why people should care about this, why people should support local, shop lower waste. And I think such a big part of our success is I'm so passionate about this topic. And I think if I wasn't passionate about it and not the face of the business and not living my life that way, why should my customers or our clients or our staff be doing it as well? And a lot of what we focus on in the store is the educational piece. So pre-pandemic, we did monthly or bi-weekly workshops and talks around how to live a lower waste lifestyle, sustainable periods. We hosted mending workshops and offered up our space for other folks to do workshops and events as well. And I think another big part of that is the community aspect. So pre the Tare shop opening, there was no community or no space for the community to gather around this type of living or this type of shopping. So creating a community space sets us apart from Bulk Barn and Superstore and other grocery stores. but also really gets people to invest in the business. We bring in new products based on what customers ask for. We really listen to recommendations and requests by our customers. And I think that also helps them have some buy-in into the business and gets them on board with the whole mission. I found it a lot easier with our first location. We opened in 2018, and it felt like every day there was a new story about single-use plastics in the news. So it was a very timely business to be opening. The G7 had just been in Halifax, and the whole G7 summit was about reduction of single-use plastics entering our waste stream. So it was a perfect timing. Opening a second business, obviously in today's news cycle, there's so many other very important topics being talked about. So it's been interesting to have to re-educate a new community and go back to that why.
Excellent, thank you. And it's been so remarkable to watch the community rise to the occasion. And you've had success now that you're in your second location. So that's awesome. We are supportive of that. Nick, last question to you. I have a few more questions to all the panelists. We're running out of time here. No pressure, Nick, by the way. But we'll see what we can do here. Nick, you're a busy person. You are a community leader, and you sort of straddle that very awkward space between social enterprise, nonprofit. But these leaders, such as yourself, they are notoriously known to be busy. They juggle a lot of responsibilities in business, community, personal life. What does a day in a community leader's life look like? And how do you cope with all of these things that are trying to get your attention and this busy schedule?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that one of the biggest things I've learned over this last year is just how precious our time really is, right? I think it's so important for us to spend our precious time on the things that we really value. For me, what I really value is propelling the Big Brothers Big Sisters movement forward, not just in our community, but across the nation. So that means the implications of that is that I always have to be open to and pursuing new revenue opportunities and opportunities for program development. And I sit on committees at the national level to help shape what Big Brothers Big Sisters will look like in the future. And I join local boards so that I'm well connected in my community. I think it goes back to, again, I'll piggyback what Connie has said. It goes back to making sure that we start with our why. And that we show up for the people and the projects that matter to us. And I will say one thing I don't think I'm very good at, because I think a lot of people could relate to this. And I think this might be a problem that our future generations will face, is just being present in the moment that we're in. I think in a world where there's more and more and more distractions every day, everybody feels like they're too busy. It's becoming more difficult to just be present in the moment that we're in, and therefore show up for the people that are in front of us. So, when I'm at home with my young kids, or I'm with my colleagues, or with my board members, or whatever it is, it's just really important, I think, to, again, someone mentioned bringing your best self, and to really show up and be present.
That's great. Excellent practical advice. Thanks, Nick. We're in a little bit of a time crunch here, so I'm going to throw out this question, and whoever wants to answer this first, and then we have time for one more. So I do apologize to our panelists for that, but COVID-19, it has impacted the way that we do business, how we organize. Even this conference that would have been in person is now, for this year, online. So if you could name one thing, what would be the most valuable lesson that you have learned of being a socially responsible entrepreneur, community leader in this year? What would it have been? What has been the COVID-19 impact on your business?
I'll go ahead. It's been massive for us, so we had to close down all of our locations. But one thing that really, stood out to me was, I started calling us a an essential business because, you know, we're one of the ones that were forced to get closed, but it's in these times that you realize what is really important in your overall well-being. And those things for us that surfaced were, yes, your physical and mental health, but just community and connection and you know, knowing what role we played and how we showed up for people when we couldn't show up for them for what they usually relied on us for, but just even the messaging and our ability to keep people connected became so important. So our business pivoted in a lot of ways, but the biggest way that, you know, the biggest thing that transcended for us was just knowing just how important our role as leaders were in the message that we brought.
That's excellent. Nick, do you want to jump in?
I'll jump in. I'll just say that I think what resonates with me is just having a culture that embraces change. And that doesn't happen overnight. So if you started to try to have a culture that embraces change last March, then it was too late and you probably had a lot more difficulty pivoting like some other organizations have. So you have to every day, whatever it is in your organization, go in with the looking at it through a lens of improvement. As soon as you stop wondering how you can improve, you know, your processes or your policies, or how you can make your organization better on every level, then I think you won't be as ready or as open to change when you're faced with required changes.
And I'll jump in, Nicholas, and just echo that. You know, I think that one of the biggest lessons that we learned as an organization is it's the importance of pressing on and innovating, you know, and it's challenging because you pivot, you create a new direction, and then the next day you're going in this direction, and the next day that's no longer allowed. And so, but I think it's just about learning how to be resilient and how to, instead of fighting that, embracing it and leveraging it to make you and make your organization stronger. And not breaking you. You know, you can go in either direction. And I think, Nick, you spoke to it so well. It is about continuing on. It is about being open to change, and not just during COVID. You know, you're right. It is constant evolution that I think we need to be aware of as we grow and as we look to have more impact in our respective areas. How do we innovate? How do we change? How do we stay in front to have the greatest impact we can for those that we serve?
Thank you, Lori. Wow, this is such a great conversation here. I have one last question, and I think what we'll do is I will pass it to Mary and Kate just so we can round up the conversation here. Let's talk about the future. Mary, could you talk to us what you feel the future of social enterprise, responsible business looks like to you?
Yeah, because we work with children around the world, that's really the leaders and the citizens of tomorrow. And I feel very positive about the future. And I think particularly because of COVID, children have been privy to a lot of adult thinking and a lot of decisions and discussions going on around them that normally wouldn't be the purview of childhood. So I think that, you know, from the writings and the art we've had from children all over the world, because we're now online, that was our big learning. You talked, Nick, about change and the challenge of change. We had no problem with change. We had a problem with technology. We had to figure out how to reinvent ourselves with technology. But I can tell you, through that learning, we have had insights into children who write us stories about what they're going to do in the world. And I don't mean the role. It's more to, you said, Nick, being mindful of today and where you are and who you are. I see huge gains in children's emotional literacy in terms of their being able to understand how to be in relationship with one another. And I see responsibility, the responsibility to be a friend, the responsibility to be a sibling, to be a son or daughter, to be a grandchild, that I'm very impressed. And when children have this capacity, it gives them the confidence and the courage to innovate. It is naturally in children to problem solve. And that's what social innovation is, taking a challenge, an intractable challenge, and seeing a business opportunity, and as you said, Nick, a heart opportunity, and to put the two together. And I'm very impressed with our children. I have to tell you, I think we've got a great future being cooked up.
Wow, thank you, Mary. So inspirational. Kate, on that note, the future of business. Mary says that the future is in our children. What would you say the future is for responsible enterprise and community leadership?
I think that people want change and expect more from their businesses and organizations that they support and that they frequent. I think that folks are going to start demanding change from the bigger corporations, especially. One thing that we do is we give 1% of all of our sales each quarter to a different local organization. It doesn't have to be a charity or registered nonprofit. So we've funded GoFundMe campaigns in the past. So I think initiatives like that and other businesses really investing back into the communities that they support, I think that's the way of the future, and it will become more and more common.
Well, thank you. And on that note, perfect way to segue. I want to extend a warm, heartfelt thank you to Lori Barker, Mary Gordon, Connie McInnis, Kate Pepler, Nick Sharpe for joining us here for this conversation to expose to our students the faces behind this very grand project in business of bringing together heart with profit and meeting needs. So thank you on behalf of our department and all of our students that are watching for your time and your insights. We look forward to welcome you back to campus at another date for another opportunity. Thank you so much.